All right, guys. Today we're going to start talking about triangles, which is really how we're going to end our year. We're going to spend a lot of time getting to know these three-sided figures. So triangles, tri meaning three, angle obviously meaning angles. So triangles are shapes that are made up of three sides with three angles, three corners. When we talk about triangles, the most basic thing that we talk about that shows up all of the time is what's called the angle sum theorem. The angle sum theorem says that all angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees. All angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees. There's this really easy visual proof that you can do of this. So if I have a triangle here, let's say I have one corner that's green, one angle that's green, one angle that's red, and one angle that's blue. And I rip up this triangle, and then I put it together so that the corners are together. So I took this green angle from up top, and I'm going to rearrange it so that it's touching my red angle, and then I'm going to take my blue angle. Check this out. When I put together my three corners, it makes a perfectly straight line. And remember from last class, from day 4, one of our big ideas was that a line has an angle measurement of 180 degrees. So when we think about the three corners of a triangle, they also add up to 180 degrees. So now knowing this, if we know M angle B, and remember the M means measure, this little alligator symbol means angle, and the one letter is always going to represent the vertex. The vertex means the corner. So the measure of angle B, so B is right here, is 64 degrees. I'm going to label that. One thing I recommend everybody do for geometry is it's very visual. So always draw the picture on a scrap piece of paper and label everything that you know along every step of the way. The measure of angle B is 64 degrees. The measure of angle A is right here, is 48 degrees. Find the measure of angle C. Well, now I can use the angle sum theorem that says that all three of the angles should add up to 180 degrees. So that means the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle B plus the measure of angle C should equal 180. 48 plus 64 plus whatever C is should give me 180. I can now combine like terms. 112 plus C equals 180. I subtract 112 from both sides. That means I'm going to write this in proper notation. The measure of angle C is going to be 68 degrees. And I can check my work, right? I can check my work by doing 48 plus 64 plus 68, and I should get exactly 180. So that's the first thing that we need to know about triangles is this angle sum theorem. All angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees. The next thing we need to know about triangles is actually a special case. Isosceles triangles. Isosceles is a special type of triangle. An isosceles triangle has two congruent sides and two congruent angles. So I know that last class I showed you kind of how to mark off congruent angles. In an isosceles triangle, what we call the base angles are the angles that are connected to the congruent sides. So I see here this side is marked with a little line, and this side is marked with one little line. Since they have the same number of tick marks, that means that this side is congruent to this side. The base angles are the angles at the bottom of those congruent sides. So that means this side is going to be congruent to this side. Now that I know this, the question is asking me to find the value of x. I can think back to my angle sum theorem, where all angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees, and I can set up my equation. So 40 plus x is supposed to be 180. I can combine like terms. This is like having 1x and 1x. So 40 plus 1x plus 1x will give me 2x equals 180. I subtract 40 from both sides. I'm left with 2x equals 140. My final step is I divide by 2. I get that x is equal to 70 degrees. What that means is each of these base angles then is going to be 70 degrees. And again, I can check my work. I can check my work by adding up all three of my angles to see if they make 180. So 40 plus 70 plus 70 is indeed 180. So I think I got that one right. All right. The last thing that we need to know about triangles is something called congruent parts of congruent triangles. Couple of things here. When we label triangles, we use this little triangle symbol, and then we label the triangles using their vertices, using their corners. So here I labeled this first angle A, B, C is congruent to triangle X, Y, Z. When you label congruent triangles, you have to follow the same order. What I mean by that is since angle A came up first in this triangle, it means that angle A is going to be congruent to the first angle that's listed in the other triangle, angle X. Notice how this triangle has been like rotated or flipped around in some way. It doesn't look exactly the same. It looks like it's in a different position as triangle ABC, but they are in fact congruent. Angle A matches up with angle X. That means angle B is going to match up with angle Y because that's the next letter that's listed. And finally, angle C is going to match up with angle Z. So to mark congruent angles, this is something we went over in last class, but to mark congruent angles, we do it with our little swoopy. Or you could do it swoopy with a line. A swoopy with a line is going to match up with the other swoopy with a line. A swoopy with two lines matches up with a swoopy with two lines. So to mark congruent angle, we use, I'm just going to call them swoops. I don't think that's official, but that's okay. Swoops with little tick marks. Remember, this is all about order. Order matters. A and X are congruent because they are the first angles listed. B and Y are congruent because they are the middle angles listed. C and Z are congruent because it's the last angle that's listed. Now we need to start thinking about sides. To mark congruent sides, kind of like up here in this problem, is we just use little hashes, little marks on the lines. The same thing is true here. Order matters. So the first side, sides are always listed using 2 letters. So the first side that I see is the first 2 letters, meaning from A to B. A to B, okay? That's my first side. A to B, since those are the first 2 letters, is going to be congruent to X to Y. X to Y. Now, since this side has 1 mark and this side has 1 mark, I can see that they are congruent. The next one, I would say B to C. B to C, I'm going to mark that one with 2 marks, is congruent to, I'm going to take the last 2 letters of my second triangle, Y, Z. Y, Z. Which would mean this last line that's unlabeled is going to be congruent to the last line that's unlabeled here. So now we know all angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees. We also know that isosceles triangles are going to have 2 congruent sides and 2 congruent angles, these base angles. Finally, we know how to label congruent parts of congruent triangles. The big, big, big thing is that order matters. So compare the order that's written for each triangle and match it up. And trust me, the more colors you have in front of you, the better. So get yourself some colored pencils, a crayon, a highlighter, make it work. Write down the problems, label, 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 label. You're going to be great. Good luck.